Kisu'lkw. Nina Bernie Francis Delwisia ha aji skudum da hoi delmine with la verb-oriented language des aglasia kweskudemidich. I'm Bernie Francis, and I'm here in CBC Studios with Jeff Douglas. And I want to pass off a little bit of information to my own people about what exactly it means to say that the Mi'kmaq language is a verb-oriented language.
Now, in English, we obviously rely on verbs, but we rely quite heavily on nouns, on adjectives. We have been learning about the Mi'kmaq language from linguist Bernie Francis here on the program over the past several weeks. And it turns out that Mi'kmaq is a very verb-focused language. It's all verb, as Bernie told one of my colleagues. And so we welcome Bernie back to Main Street. Bernie, welcome.
Well, Alan, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here again.
Thanks
always.
again. What
do you mean? What does it mean to say that a language is verb-focused?
It sees the world as it really is, much better than the English language.
How so?
Simply because nothing is stationary. They say that the only thing that's stationary is change.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely true. We could look at any noun and we could perhaps, it's just a recycled verb, you know. If you look at the Hopi language, which is part of the Algonquian group of languages, it's much more so than Mi'kmaq. Like, for example, in Hopi, you can't even say that it's this is a table. You have to say it's tabling.
It's tabling.
It's tabling. In other words, it's in the process of doing something. It's not just sitting there being a table. You see what I mean?
I do, yeah.
And sure enough, all people, scientists of the past tell us this, that this is an actual fact, that things are moving. The table is not just sitting there, it's actually doing something. And so microscopically or in quantum mechanics, that will prove itself to be true.
Yeah, like we know that on this desk or table or whatever we're sitting at, we know that at a molecular level, or at least we do now. I mean, in modern science, we know that there are molecules bouncing back and forth, creating the shape of this thing we're calling a table.
Exactly.
But this is, I mean, we're talking about a language that is thousands of years old when we're talking about the Mi'kmaq language.
Right,
so
exactly.
How do you think it arrived at that conclusion or at that philosophy thousands of years ago?
That's a very good question. I don't know what the language looked like 1,000 years ago, but I can tell you, you can go back. I translated an old letter of 1750, so we're only talking 250 years ago or something like that. I remember looking at it, and it's pretty much the same as it is today, except with a few extra sounds that we no longer have in the Mi'kmaq language. But even at that time, our language looked very verb-focused even then. So perhaps it wasn't exactly understanding things in the molecular level, but certainly they understood that there's constant change, to the point that even the word for creator is a verb in Mi'kmaq. It's not a noun as it is in English.
God is a verb.
God is a verb.
What is the word?
The word is Kisu'lkw. The missionaries, first of all, Kisu'lkw could mean the creator. Or it could be, let me first of all say, it could be she the creator, he the creator, or it the creator. It could be any one of those three.
Okay.
But the it has to be a sentient it. That is, it has to be like a human and perceives things from its senses, like sight and smell and so on, you know. So that is God in the mind of the Mi'kmaq person who understands their spirituality is not, it can't be, or he can't be, or she can't be anything that simply sits up there and kind of looks upon us and makes sure that we don't commit any sins and so on, like we were taught.
Because the Creator is action.
That's
by
right. That's right. The Creator is action. Exactly right. And it's always moving, but mostly always changing. That's very, very important, and that's the basis from which the Mi'kmaq spirituality actually begins.
Now, what do you think philosophically? This is what it blows my mind. These are like huge philosophical differences, right? That are demonstrated in the language. What does it say about the Mi'kmaq, their view of the world, the way they exist in the world, that this is the form their language took?
Right. That's a very good question, and it takes tremendous amount of pleasure for me to to answer this. And of course, you have to. Some of the times that when we hear preachers preaching, I know that there's a line in the Bible that says, "Go and have dominion over all," and that is so alien to a Mi'kmaq person because they consider themselves as just simply part of a larger web. They're just part and parcel. In other words, when they call themselves the word Ulnu, which has been translated to mean Indian, but obviously it only means person, all they're saying is that I am an Ulnu, as different from a Diam, which is a moose, as different from a Gobit, which is a beaver, and so on, you see.
Just a different type of being.
Just a different type of being. Like a beaver is highly respected because of its engineering techniques, you know.
Yeah.
So they don't think that they're, they realize that beavers are intelligent, and so are all the other animals. They have their specialties. And we as Ulnu, or we as persons, we do as well.
Ulnu.
Ulnu, exactly.
Ulnu.
Yeah. If someone is different, like a Mohawk or Cree, then we would say Bilu Ulnu, a different kind of person.
Okay.
Literally.
Now, is that a noun?
Ulnu, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So what differentiates then what is a verb and what is a noun?
Well, the fact that you can conjugate it, like you can take and of course it's some kind of action, you see. Like if you say ulnui, it becomes a verb suddenly. Ulnui. It means I am a person, you know.
Oh, okay, yes,
and if I were to say you are, and then I would say ulnuin, that means you are a person. You're in the process of being a person.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I am in the process.
Yeah,
Still
exactly.
in the process of being, maybe
right.
even becoming a person.
Well, we might invite you to the human race yet, you know, Jeff. You never know.
That's one day. That's the goal. That's the goal.
It's a goal,
anyway.
yeah. But what's interesting too is what people call in English adjectives, for example. And one of the popular, well-known adjective, of course, is the color. For example, black, red, white, and yellow. These are pure colors in Mi'kmaq. Now, all of those. It would be definitely, they would all be described as being adjectival. Whereas in Mi'kmaq, these are all verbs as well. So people ask me, when I say this, of course, people kind of look at me with one eye, you know, and say, how can color be a verb? Well, of course it's a verb because there's a relatively simple way of testing it. If you take a photograph of a car that's sitting in hot sun, and take a picture of it again, let's say 3-4 months down the road, and look at it again.
In a cloud or in a different...
No, in the exact same condition. But you look at it again, you look at that picture 3 or 4 months down the road, that same car that's been sitting in the sun for that long, you will see that it's no longer the same red as it was when you first took a picture of it. So something was going on. In other words, in Mi'kmaq, what you say, you don't say a car is red. In Mi'kmaq, you say the car is redding.
Redding.
It's redding, or if it was black, you'd say blacking, or whatever. Any of those colors, yellowing. They are all verbs, and they conjugate just like any other verb.
And it is. This all goes to the fact what you mentioned off the top, that the universe is in flux. That
exactly.
And that again is a very. I just can't get over the philosophical differences that would give rise to that. You know that the Mi'kmaq were almost more. Is it just like they were more at ease with the fact that this is all temporary?
Yes, they were very at ease with that. I mean, why not? Because that is a fact, that it's all temporary. We're all temporary, for that matter. I mean, even if you live to be 90 or 100 years old, that's a very short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. So, yes, they certainly see the temporariness of it all, and much like the Buddhists do, it's the same thing with them. So there's no problem for Mi'kmaq people to understand things like that. Much like the Hopi people don't understand, have no problem understanding what English describes as time and space. Well, in the Hopi language, there's such a term as time-space, all in the one concept. So that's why many of them do quite well when they're studying physics and quantum mechanics and so on.
That they just are philosophically predisposed to thinking outside the box.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They definitely grew up with it. So what is there to learn?
So Bertie, do you think that the emphasis on verbs in the Mi'kmaq language might be a result of how traditionally the Mi'kmaq lived here? That because it was more like there wasn't the place where you had your house and that was just your house forever, right? That it was nomadic. Am I understand?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Do you think it's a result of that?
I
Fewer
don't know.
possessions
I really don't know if it's the result of it, but I will tell you that they moved around this area where they would consider almost anywhere in Nova Scotia or the Maritimes as home. It's not like you can call a particular area home because, like the word Tracadie, for example, Tracadie comes from the word Dlahadi, which is a Mi'kmaq word for encampment. So that means that wherever you see the term or the place name Tracadie in English, in Nova Scotia, PEI, New Brunswick, Quebec, wherever you see it in Newfoundland, you will know that it's because Mi'kmaq people looked upon it as a camping place for whatever. It all depends on where the food was best at the time or what it was they were looking for. Supposing it's time to pick a certain medicine, well, that they would encamp in that area and then pick medicines until they were done and move on somewhere else. The other thing is grandmother sites that they would go to. Every time that these grandmother sites were visited, our people felt very, very much at home.
What is a grandmother
site? Well, grandmother site is that you'll find them here in, I think it's called a Tuscut River, I believe. You'll see one great big rock sticking out of a body of water, like a little lake, and it looks from the back end, you would see it looks like a grandmother sitting there and doing something,
Okay.
Until you get to the front, you get a better look. But of course, when you're there, the Mi'kmaq people visited these places, they felt right at home because it was just part of their being, part of their home, and they traveled to these places often.
Without, though, ever, if I'm understanding correctly, without ever feeling the need to own it.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, they were more stewards of the land than owners. They understood that it was a gift. It was a gift that they'll have to care for, and that's why many of them are involved in environmental issues these days because they understand it quite well. And then, so they're not going to. It's like someone gives you, a gift like a car. You will do your best to take care of it. Well, that's exactly what the Mi'kmaq people do with this land.
It is. I think that this philosophically just resonates.
Yeah.
So much today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is one of the biggest reasons. This is something that perhaps is not quite understood in the Abercrombie affair regarding the mill. The toxins that have been going to the reserve. I used to swim in that area, and somebody said one time that within a year you're not going to be able to swim there any longer. One of the native people said that, and I couldn't believe that it wasn't a year. It was 2 days when a fish, started coming belly up dead. So we understood that the land and the water in that area was being attacked, and people were so very concerned at the time, but they just didn't have any power then. So it was very, very disheartening for the people that they couldn't do anything. But as you know, they're trying to come to a negotiated agreement now. I just hope it never opens again. At least if they do, open it somewhere else, not on the reserve.
I want to go back a little bit just to the idea, what you mentioned earlier about, we said that it is true, a table going, the Hopi, you said,
right.
The even table, it is tabling.
Right.
It is tabling. But in Mi'kmaq, that it is reading, it is browning, does it not seem like an amazing insight to you for a language that preceded? This is relatively recent understanding, the physics of this. Does it not seem amazing to you that
Well, yes, of course. But you see, perhaps not as amazing to me as it might be to you, because I grew up with it, and I kind of, had, I guess you could say, an intuition, a feeling about it that you might not get when you're just learning the language, let's say, for the first time. And sometimes it's very saddening to think that some of our own people who were prevented from speaking their language or learning their language at the residential school debacle, that when they attempt to learn the language after the fact, by the time they become adults, I suspect that these are the areas that they will be missing. And these are very, very important philosophical understandings that they might miss completely. Yes, you could learn how to utter the words and so on, but it takes a while before you get the feeling about what the culture is and what the meaning of spirituality is. And growing up with it and growing up on the reservation, as bad as that sounds, was one of the best things that could have happened to me.
I hear now, and I think I've known on a academic level, I guess, that the residential school's insistence on no native language, no indigenous language, that it was about more than the language. But I think during the course of these conversations, today in particular, just what was killed when they made that attempt to kill that language.
Right. Someone at that time understood. They must have understood that if you work hard to prevent the language from being used and spoken, then that's the surest way to kill the culture as well. Because there's no doubt, it's been said by people a lot smarter than I am, and certainly a lot wiser, that the language is the heart of the culture. If you kill the language, you kill the culture. And that is very true, because it's difficult to understand the Mi'kmaq culture and the Mi'kmaq spirituality using another filter. And all languages are filters. And in this case, if you use the filter called English to try to understand Mi'kmaq spirituality, it's very, very difficult.
Well, because you're always trying to bend it back. It's the same whenever you learn a language, but a lot of the languages, European languages, my wife speaks Spanish. I've learned enough Spanish to at least know what my in-laws are saying about me when I'm down there. But philosophically, these are all coming out of a Catholic tradition, out of it. Like, their mindset is the same. Their worldview is very similar. So I might have to learn different vocabulary.
Yeah.
But this, we're talking about two very completely different ideologies and the way a human being sits in this planet.
That's absolutely true. These two languages, the Mi'kmaq language and English language, and all of the other Indo-European languages, they're very different from these Algonquin languages that exist here. There are about 51 of them. But Mi'kmaq is very different in a sense that even our nouns there's certain words that we do not have, such as the word father, mother, daughter, son. Those words do not exist in the Mi'kmaq language.
Okay, that is, you've blown my mind too much for one day. We have to come back to that. That is a topic for another day, though.
Okay.
Is that a deal?
That's a deal.
All right, awesome. Thank you for this, Bernie.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bernie Francis is going to return to Main Street. We have his word on that. And we're going to post this conversation at cbc.ca/mainhfx, where you can also find Bernie's previous conversations here and other stories from Main Street, either on that website, or you can use the CBC Listen app on your device.
This is CBC.